I've been playing Pokemon games since they first released in America. I remember standing in line to get Pokemon Red with my mom back when I was still in the single digits of years of age. And now here I am in my 30s, still playing some of those exact same games. I am here to start my journey through doing every single of the 151 Pokemon as solo challenges. This past year in 2024, I really had a lot of fun getting into some newer gameplay and newer ideas beyond just Nuzlockes for Pokemon games alongside my friend Carp. And so I decided this year for 2025, I really wanted to try something entirely new. I wanted to do an entirely new project. I really wanted to give this a go. I've seen so many different creators do this, but this has always felt like a very daunting task. But thankfully, there are other creators who have created a lot of resources. And so therefore, I realize that these sorts of challenges are much more accessible for people who might be very good editors like myself, but don't know how to do a lick of coding. So thank you so much to Scott's Thoughts for all of the sort of free resources that are going to be used in this video. Truly appreciate it. And I think this is just as good a time as any to actually talk about what we're looking at, which is Bulbasaur. We're starting off with Pokemon number 1 in the Pokedex, instantly beat the rival. We are going to skip the secondary rival challenge simply because I want to go against Flareon, who I don't actually think is actually going to be the toughest team, which I kind of came to realize later, but at the time I was just thinking go against the fire guy, you know? After this, I go into Viridian Forest because I do need to level up a little bit just to make sure that I get Vine Whip onto my moveset. So I'm going to, of course, go ahead and train against some of the bug trainers, or bug catchers rather. And then I'm going to, of course, go against the junior trainer here in Brock's gym. And it's going to start off a little slow just because I'm starting off with only Leech Seed. I know I'm very close to getting to level 13. But once the Diglett is done for, I get Vine Whip, which of course is going to make Sandshrew a one-shot hit. I also am going to say that, like, I'm not a speedrunner by any means necessary. I am, of course, still looking at time and still trying to do my best with time. One thing that I found very fascinating about this whole process was the fact that there are people who have played a Bulbasaur in under 40 minutes, and I just think that that's massively impressive. I'm not that level of speedrunner, so you're probably not going to see anything quite of that caliber, but I am going to do my best. This is more about sort of learning different ways to play Pokemon more than being kind of a perfectionist, I think. Although I am obviously going to get very frustrated later on in this video with not being able to get certain times. So I guess I'm already in the right mindset to be doing this challenge. But I go through Mount Moon, I fight as few people as I possibly can. I do a couple extra fights just to get some extra experience points kind of early on with Bulbasaur. I, of course, go against Team Rocket for the very first time. They are not that large of a challenge. Really, I would say coughing is the biggest issue, really at any point with any of the Team Rocket fights. I then get out of Mount Moon and instantly go to Misty's gym. I go through both of the extra trainers there, get the extra experience points, of course. Then I go against Staryu. Staryu's instantly down. The one thing that I didn't think about was the fact that I use so much Vine Whip against other people. I really should have taken the brief moment to go back and heal, because I am going to end this fight with no Vine Whips. It got very close. I mean, it worked out, but obviously if I had run out faster than that, it would have been very suboptimal. We then immediately go back to the bridge, for Nugget Bridge rather, and we are going to fight the rival with Bulbasaur. Of course, currently Spearow is the largest point of contention here. This is going to be the hardest part of this fight, but I can take it out somewhat easily, I guess. And then, of course, the next two guys go down pretty quickly. Eevee could also be a challenge, but won't really prove to be one, at least not today, thank goodness. I'll also say that this is technically my second run. My very first run, wasn't something that I necessarily learned too much about. It was more about learning this software that I have already previously mentioned, coming from Scott's Thoughts. I wanted to really kind of have my hand on it, try and learn a little bit about getting faster and better with going at 4 times speed and getting through these things as quickly as possible. I feel like even at 4 times speed and mashing the A button, I feel like I'm still losing a lot of time in conversations and everything like that. So I got to figure something out for that, I think, in future runs. Again, not speedrunning, but still something that I want to try and hold myself accountable for getting better at all of this. After we fight the dig guy, the dig rocket guy, we're going to go to St. Anne, the SS Anne, not St. Anne, sorry about that. And then we're going to, first of all, of course, we're going to have to go immediately for the TM for Body Slam. That's going to be on our moveset for the remainder of the game. I do think that something like Takedown or Double Edge could have potentially come in handy in the future. It's possible that I held on to Body Slam for far too long, but I don't like things like the recoil when I'm so much weaker as a starter Pokemon as I would be for a more evolved form. But also it has less PP. And so I don't want to deal with that. What I also don't want to deal with is my rival. He is so easy to beat here on the boat. And so we get cut, and we also then immediately run straight to Lieutenant Surge, who I think was, of course, much more difficult in Red and Blue. But because Yellow had a lot of sort of similarities to the anime show that came out, they really kind of nerfed him. And so he's a very easy, very fast fight. We then go to the rock tunnel. I'm still working on the pathing on this one too. I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 fights that I could probably skip. I'm also, of course, not using flash at all, so I can't see where anyone is. I'm trying to go completely off memory. This is a game that I've definitely played since being a kid, but I haven't played it with such frequency that I have learned every single pixel. So the pathing situation in this game is going to be probably what takes up the most amount of my timer, at least in the first half of the game. And that's not foreshadowing at all. As we finish up the last half of Rock Tunnel, I wanted to go backwards a little bit in conversation just to talk about sort of why I'm doing this challenge. It's something that I've really been thinking about a lot for what I wanted to do in 2025. I've been a content creator for 9 years now, both in podcasting and in video and in streaming, everything like that. So this was something that I felt was going to be an interesting new challenge. Something to start from scratch, something to just sort of stretch my legs in terms of content that I've never really tried before. I have been doing some things like Nuzlocke runs, both in streams and in regular edited content. And I've also been doing a Soul Link with my friend Carp, which has been an absolute blast. There's been a lot of figuring it out as we go because we're using one of the newer games, Scarlet and Violet, and there are so many different elements compared to how these older games work. Encounters alone make it very difficult to sort of parse through. And so that challenge has been an absolute blast to be a part of. Therefore, I wanted to do something kind of like this to challenge myself in a very different way. What was not a challenge was Rock Tunnel, and what's also not going to be a challenge is the first rocket here. In fact, most of this base is not going to be a challenge at all. I'm going to skip as many of the fights as possible. I'm really going against the grain for myself here. I'm the type of gamer who will check every single corner, every single pocket, every single everything every time I play a game. I want every item. I want to unlock everything. So not going for every single item and not double checking every single fight is kind of a big change for me in this way. But I'm still going through, I'm still rinsing everyone around me so far. I mean, knock on wood that continues. Team Rocket, the duo, continues to be not an issue whatsoever. And so we, of course, make our way to Giovanni's first team. his team, I mean, at least with Bulbasaur, is really never going to be a problem. Onix and Rhyhorn, instant hits. And because he uses guard spec here, instead of going for really any kind of damage, he's going to be an instant win. He gives me the Sylph Scope, and so I can make my way over to the tower in Lavender Town. I do, of course, have to go against my rival, who has been aptly named Butt, because that is how he plays, like Butt. I go through his first 2 Pokemon. I go through Shelter, easy peasy. Sandshrew is not an issue at all. Eevee is probably the person that puts up the most fight, maybe Fearow. Fearow having Mirror Move could potentially be an issue later on, but for sure right now it's not an issue. What is an issue is Ghastly. This sort of fight is absolutely abysmal, and I really struggled in this tower. It's making me very aware that I didn't really think ahead of time about the issue that I'm going to have with Agatha. Agatha, I think, is going to be potentially the hardest fight for me, just because I really don't have anything in my move pool that is at any point going to be really effective against the Pokemon that she has. I can, of course, use Growth or potentially eventually replace that with Swords Dance and, really set up some moves that can do some damage, but they'll never be, hitting Agatha's Pokemon for major damage. And I'm kind of having a little bit of a similar issue here with Weezing. I mentioned this earlier about how he was going to be probably the hardest part of the Team Rocket duo, and he continues to be. He does get me kind of low in HP, but we do, of course, win out. We see Mr. Fuji. I try to leave, I don't know why, and then I get the Poké Flute, and now we can move on to the next thing. I did, of course, forget about Celadon City's gym. This is part of the thing that is kind of a misplay in a way. I am going to take the bike route, so I guess it's not too far out of my way, but I was already previously there, so the fact that I didn't just do it then and there does kind of have a small issue, I would say, at least for my timing, because I'm about to hit an hour, and this will be my 4th gym. Feels very low. Feels very slow, really. I feel like the Team Rocket stuff really ate into my time in a way that I wasn't really expecting, considering I thought I was going very quickly. Speaking of going too quickly, though, I go through a couple people in Erica's gym, and then realize very quickly that I've set myself up very poorly. I'm going into this fight with only 5 PP for Body Slam, and so of course I lose so much time to just getting hit with Constrict over and over and over again, which I do skip just because it does take so much time. I have almost no health by the time I am done with her final Pokemon. Thank goodness all she had was a Gloom instead of a Vileplume. That probably would have been a reset. I really pushed the limits, I think, of Bulbasaur in that moment. But immediately after fighting Erica, we go to Sylph. We're going to do everything in our ability to really push the boundaries here. We're going to get the card key as fast as possible. We're going to go fight our rival as fast as possible. As always, Sandslash, not really a problem at all. So I'm going to use Sleep Powder as a setup. It wakes up very quickly, and instead, I just keep going for growth. Poison Sting does not really do anything to me at all. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, Sandslash only sees the grass, does not see poison, so it keeps using poison moves, thinking it'll be effective. So, I guess that's sort of just a misplay on the AI's part. There's a lot of glitches, and I think a lot of sort of misreads that the game itself does, which is very interesting. Something that I think was also a fun part of this challenge for myself was I very much am the kind of person that goes, does this move do damage? No? Then why would I keep it, right? I want the more fun looking things, because I definitely use Pokemon usually as something that is just for fun and for the vibe of everything. But there is something to be said about basically min-maxing your team, and so learning a lot more in this series about the different moves and how they change my outcomes especially with the fact that you have badge boosts in this first gen that also get reconfigured every single time you use a move that changes your stats. And that is one of the cool things too about this software that we're getting from Scott's Thoughts, is it really breaks it down for you in a very neat way. Seeing those numbers change and actually being able to see why I'm just absolutely rinsing through Giovanni, pretty cool. Once we're done with Sylph, we're going to instantly go to Sabrina. Sabrina should be very difficult because of the fact that I am Grass Poison and she is Psychic. And let's be honest with ourselves, I'm a little underleveled for this fight. But I'm going to go in after this fight after all. I really probably should have just gone for the 5th gym first with Koga. And as I said that, in this recording session, this is me immediately cutting my first version of this audio to say that I got so lucky in this fight, but it's also because I did in fact fight the 5th gym. I don't know what I was thinking in the original cut of this video, but in real time, this little audio bit is me realizing that I had fully left out the fight against Koga. And so I'm going to backtrack, put it in right here to show you that I did in fact do it. And once again, just like the fight against Sabrina, I'm going in ungodly unleveled, and I'm getting possibly the luckiest rolls that I will have in this entire video. Both Koga and Sabrina, I did not have any reason to do as well as I did against either of them. And yet, at very underleveled, I beat both of these gym leaders. Back on track, here we are in the Pokemon Mansion. We're going to get the key. This is the only time in this entire series where I will show this clip, because walking on this floor on Cinnabar Island is easily the worst eyesore of this entire game. Now, here we go against Blaine. You want to talk about a guy who should be a problem? Well, there he goes. That's our very first reset. I go into that fight, instantly die. Ninetales, I feel like, shouldn't be the largest problem, but Ninetales is gonna kind of be the largest problem. Ninetales is kind of the gatekeeper, I suppose, to some extent, and they are going to constantly leave me in a place of hurt. So even if I get to Rapidash like I do there, I just die. So we go in once again, but look at this. I'm down to 8 health on my 3rd attempt here, or after 2 resets, and it's yet another reset. So here we go. We're going to go and use a few rare candies and see if that changes anything. And it does seem to make a difference, I'll tell you that. I'm going in with obviously higher stats. I should be able to potentially do a little bit extra damage with being able to outspeed once I get the boosts, of course, using growth. Of course, again, after using Sleep Powder on Ninetales. Being able to set up to really do some extra damage in this fight is going to make a big difference. There's also no opportunity for me to potentially level up in the middle of the fight and lose the badge boosts because I used the rare candies. I probably should have saved some for later. I don't know. To this day, since it's really my first attempt at this challenge, I'm still kind of figuring out when I use the rare candies, how many I should use, and so on and so forth. But I finally, of course, get that badge, and so I make my way to the 8th and final badge. You do have to fight 2 people minimum in order to get to Giovanni. You need to make a path for yourself. And so I go through, and I would say I've rinsed those teams pretty easily. I'm fairly well leveled, and I can do some pretty big damage at this point. Now, the biggest problem, though, of course, is that because you move so quickly, it's very easy to make a misstep like I just did. I had to fight 1 extra person before going against Giovanni. And here we are with his final team that we will see in this game. And of course, there's the guard spec. I think he has potentially got like a sponsor or something like that. Or he just bought way too many the last time he went to the store and was like, I got to use them at this point. But we put Doug Trio to sleep and we set up. I only use a couple because I know I'm going to have a badge boost reset effectively once I level up here. So I'm going to leave myself a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm going to go through the first few Pokemon here. Dugtrio, Persian, Nidoqueen, easy peasy. I'm going to go ahead and start another round of setting up just a little bit. I do just one, and then I go up against the Nidoking. Although he does have a few of these guard spec situations, he is really not an issue. And of course, Rhydon will never be a problem for Bulbasaur or any kind of grass Pokemon. So we get the 8th badge and we walk towards Victory Road. Of course, Butt shows up, always has to be there. It's interesting to always be trailing after Butt instead of Butt trailing after me, but I suppose that's just how the cookie crumbles or how the game goes. So we go up against his team here, and the first 2 Pokemon, not really a challenge. Cloyster, not really a problem. I have not done any setup, so I'm going to do some setup here finally against the Magneton. It's going to be kind of needed, really. Unfortunately, he does get me confused. It's going to hit me, but not nearly as hard as I was expecting. In other moments, like going up against the Ghastlies, that was getting me down to almost no health at all. But here, I was being able to fight it pretty quickly. And of course, because of my setups, my defense is pretty strong against Kadabra. He's got nothing on me really at this point. But I go in, and while hurt, I get pretty low. I'm getting dangerously close to the end of my health, but Kadabra goes down. And Flareon, as I mentioned earlier, while I thought it was going to be the hardest thing to fight, it really was no issue whatsoever. I could have set up one more time there, I believe, and probably one-shot the Flareon. Not an issue, though. We go through Victory Road. I can actually avoid every fight if I want to. This is the only one where I made a misstep. I took one step in when I meant to go down one more. So I do end up fighting one cool trainer. But, I mean, yeah, hey, he was cool. So maybe I just wanted to hang out, I guess. The Kingler, not an issue. Tentacruel, because it does have poison type, does pose a little bit of a challenge. But of course, Blastoise, not a problem at all, even for Bulbasaur. And so finally, we are going up against the Elite Four with Bulbasaur at level 58. I do think that I'm a little underleveled in the fact that I'm here at an hour 43, essentially. As I mentioned earlier, there are people doing this in an hour or more, less than what I'm doing it. And I feel like I was really sprinting this entire time. I did make a few missteps here and there, but I didn't think they were an hour's worth. So this is going to be an interesting year of seeing where I can cut corners, where I can make things go faster. And of course, the better the Pokemon, the faster that I'll probably get through some of these things. I don't think that any of the starters as a starter for the entire time is really going to be all that great. But Bulbasaur is doing pretty good. I think Bulbasaur is really holding its own. I've always known that Bulbasaur was good. I wish its moveset had a little bit more variety. But even with a strong normal type move in Body Slam and Razor Leaf, which really isn't all that powerful, I think we're doing pretty well. Lorelei poses a very interesting threat because all of the water type situations are going to be not too bad for Bulbasaur to fight, but of course ice type moves are super effective. So getting into this, Jinx, I mean really all of them of course have a move that could really do me in at the end of the day, but Jinx and Lapras feel like the biggest threats, and the fact that we get through this pretty quickly makes me feel pretty confident about how this goes. And then I clearly looked away for a moment, and unfortunately that is going to be a reset just because of negligence, and that sucks. And I'm going to call it out, and I'm going to point out that I could have done better. So I go through, I defeat her again, very quickly, very easily. No problem. This time, Bulbasaur stays Bulbasaur, does not become Ivysaur. We're fine. We move on to Bruno, who is, of the Elite Four, I would argue kind of embarrassingly bad. Does not pose really any kind of threat, especially to Bulbasaur. But I really can't think of many Pokemon that would struggle with this guy. I mean, people like Weedle will definitely be an issue, I think. But as someone who, one of the first solo challenges I ever did for a different piece of content that actually has not come out yet, I went through this with Rattata solo, And yeah, kind of crushed it. Like, I mean, he of course at least has a very varied pool of moves that he can use. So it really was no issue to go against him. What is an issue is Gengar and really all of Agatha's team. In my first run through, I really thought about pulling in some of the footage from my very first run through, but it's kind of moot to this run. So there was no real reason to go digging through all of it, because I swear that is where at least 20 minutes of the run went. The AI was going absolutely berserk in my first run through. She was substituting, she was not exchanging, but you know what I'm saying. She was swapping out Pokemon left and right. I mean, just the way she operated in my first run, I thought, is my game broken? What's happening? So I was very glad to get to this part and go, this is going to be an issue. I'm really going to have to think very hard about each and every move. Obviously, I want to move quickly, but, you know, how am I going to set myself up for success here? And it turns out that first run, definitely a fluke. Something weird going on there, because I get here and honestly, kind of a pushover. I was expecting this to be the hardest fought portion of the entire video, and Agatha was not a problem at all. Lance, however, I guess maybe he got the word that Agatha wasn't giving me any trouble and said, well, we don't want him to get under 2 hours, right? And of course I was going, no, I would certainly love to finish this under 2 hours. It's very slow, but for my first run, for my first guy, not too bad, right? And Lance said, yeah, sure, go for it. You know, Gyarados is pretty difficult, but I think you can get through them. I think you can get some setups here and go up against Dragonair, take those on. The fact that we're not 1 or even 2 hitting them does seem like an issue. That one goes down fairly good. But then we get to Aerodactyl. Aerodactyl outspeeds, and that's the first reset against him. So we come right back. This is yet another attempt. Skipping directly to Aerodactyl. Once again, he's going to wake up. Okay, great. Doesn't matter. All we have to do is put Dragonite to... Okay, well, that is a reset. Blizzard hits instantly. Great. Well, we tried to put Aerodactyl to sleep, and we do, but he, of course, all of his wing attacks do everything. I die. Okay, we get to Dragonite again this time, and Fire Blast takes me out. Then I try to put Aerodactyl to sleep. He kills me with a wing attack. Then I die to a Dragonair. Okay, now we're getting worse. Then Aerodactyl again. Then a Gyarados. Then an Aerodactyl again. This is where I take the time to change my learn set. And I say, okay, growth isn't doing anything for me anymore. Maybe it's time to break out Swords Dance. Swords Dance goes into the moveset, and I still die to Aerodactyl. But finally, we get down to Brax Tax with Dragonite. And surely we can win this one out. Here we are. After 18 resets, finally, almost every single reset effectively in this game has come at the hands of Lance. Lance is posing a far greater problem than I could have expected for this run. I really thought Agatha was going to be the biggest issue, but I do everything in my ability to set up as best as I possibly can. Before the Aerodactyl, I get down to 12 health. Luckily, he stays asleep long enough for me to do one more Swords Dance that I waited on because I knew I was going to have the level reset. I get, again, 12 damage in. I take the chance on Sleep Powder. I get Dragonite asleep, and I 2-hit him, and Lance is finally defeated. We move on now past 2 hours. You can see how long it took us to get through all the Lance stuff. We finally get to the rival, the final fight. He has not been an issue at any point in this game. So surely he's going to be easy breezy, lemon peasy, put me in the annals of history right now. Let's get it moving. I go in there, I defeat his Sandslash, I defeat his Alakazam, I go up against Exeggutor, and he is not an issue whatsoever. Magneton, I put him to sleep. He wakes up instantly. I put him back to sleep. Okay, no problem. I Swords Dance one more time. Now we're going to Body Slam, and nope, he takes a little bit more damage. Finally, Cloyster. Shouldn't be an issue. Cloyster has always been easy. Oh, God. I'm really hoping that this does not become a continuous thing like it did with Lance. Because here I am, I'd only get one setup against the Sandslash. I just panic and I just instantly take him down. Psychic is going to hit me and take me down so far. I get pretty terrified. I do Sleep Powder. I do one more Swords Dance setup. I know that the reset's coming up, so I can't overdo it. But I Body Slam, take him out. I'm going to Sleep Powder against Exeggutor. I get lucky. I feel like that shouldn't necessarily work on another grass Pokemon, but it does. I get the knockout. Magneton comes out. I do Sleep Powder, and of course it doesn't work somehow. Swift hits me. I'm down to 20. I Sleep Powder. We are in dangerous territory. And because of my rules, I'm not using any items. I haven't so far in any point, obviously. And so why am I going to start now on the final fight? Cloyster goes down. I'm down to 20 health still, but Flareon is not an issue. Never has been, never will be. And with that, at 2 hours and 11 minutes and 32 seconds, 0.66, I get through this with 19 resets at level 63. Now, like I said, there's definitely some opportunities to get better at this. There are people who have done this under an hour, as I also mentioned earlier. So 2 hours, 11 minutes seems a little ridiculous, but for a first run, I will take it. I will definitely be getting better at my pathing, figuring out which fights I don't need to do, where the best items are, which things to avoid, and maybe then we'll have an opportunity to come back and get a slightly better time for Bulbasaur, because I'm sure he can definitely do it. But for now, that is going to do it for this very first solo challenge. I will be back next week for the next installment of this series. I'll be doing Charmander, and I'm really looking forward to that one. That was my first starter ever, and so I can't wait to see what he does. See you soon.